to Hot Atlanta to talk about these Atlanta Falcons in the Mercedes-Benz Domes that has a great Chick-fil-A that I've got to eat during bowl season, but never during a playoff game. The Atlanta Falcons. So why don't we talk about who we're losing there as far as major losses, major gains. So the first one I'm gonna lead off with, it's a loss.
Is that a major loss?
It may be addition by subtraction.
Honestly, none of these are really major losses.
Desmond Ridder, who I believe I think he got traded to the Panthers, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know about that one.
Let me see. Hold on. I'll pull it up. I believe. Yeah. Traded. Oh no, I'm sorry. Not Carolina, to Arizona.
Cardinals. Yeah,
that's what Cardinals. I thought. Okay. Yes, to the Cardinals. And then we have wide receiver Van Jefferson got traded to your Lures up there in Pittsburgh.
That's right.
Tight end Jonnu Smith down in Miami with the Dolphins. Outside linebacker, edge rusher, like their only edge rusher remaining, Bud Dupree, traded to the LA Chargers, and then Calais Campbell heading down to Miami for the Dolphins. The guys they picked up, we all know about Kirk Cousins, kind of a big free agency splash, who we're going to talk about in a second as he's coming off that Achilles tear. Darnell Mooney coming over from Chicago, Rondell Moore coming over from Arizona, and then
the surprise of the draft.
The surprise indeed. Big Penix energy, Mr. Michael Penix himself, who we were both high on as a prospect. Yeah. I think he's the best pure thrower out of the pocket passer out of this entire draft. Yeah. But especially as we look at their roster, this is an absolutely absurd move. Absurd.
Shock of the night for sure.
You are guaranteeing essentially that either you had a terrible free agency move in Kirk Cousins because he doesn't work out, and then you have to slot in Penix, or that you're just wasting away Michael Penix, who I didn't really take too much stock in him being an older quarterback. I think he's like 26. But, I mean, now I do. If you're just going to sit him for, 3-4 years, right?
3-4 years, right.
Ride the pine. Like, I just don't get it. But, I mean, hey, I guess we got to move on. That was their decision. They made their bed. Let them lay in it. Any big takeaways from, big losses, big ads, anything that sticks out to you?
Well, I think from a Falcons standpoint, looking back at last year, like their offense was okay. Their defense was not great. And I don't see any additions as far as defense goes. So yeah. I think you're going to touch on that a little bit more here in a couple minutes. But from an offensive standpoint, I think they're going to be solid. I mean, their offensive line is pretty good. They're returning a couple of stud backs in Bijan Robinson and Algier. We'll see about these wide receiver or catching
Mooney and Moore
options that they have. Drake London has been okay, but he hasn't been the number one or a first round guy like they expected. Kyle Pitts kind of the same way. So, was it the lack of quarterback play that has held Pitts and London back? We're about to find out.
That's what everybody's saying, right? That's what all the fantasy nerds are saying, right?
Yeah, so. I mean, from an offensive perspective, I think they'll be good. I think they'll be solid. But from a defense perspective, I can't name half a dozen dudes on their defense.
Yes, so. we are definitely going to get into that. Before we jump over to the big takeaways, let's talk about these injuries, because there are two big injuries to two big players for this team. We already mentioned Kirk Cousins dealing with an Achilles tear. So as we can see here, your Achilles tendon is connected to your calf muscles. So when it's torn, it does require surgery to repair. This is a lengthy recovery process, about 10 to 12 months on average return to play. So when we talk about recovery timelines, just kind of at the top, we're talking about when can we actually see this guy getting out to the field and getting back to actually being a pro athlete and a professional football player, getting to the things they can do. Not just, hey, is everything fully healed? Because that doesn't equate always. It's not like you're just, hey, I can walk, I can play football. There's a lot of steps in between that Derek and I know very well, because that's kind of our world as physical therapists. That's what we do. So he's got about 10 and a half months of recovery time for the season. The other thing to note is it is a right Achilles tear. So that is his back leg where he has to kind of generate that power from for Kirk Cousins. So what are you thinking about Cousins going into the season? Are you think this is going to affect him? Or, is this something that's keeping you staying away? Cousins going around QB 18 in most drafts there, about 146 overall. What are you thinking?
So first thing, as far as Kirk Cousins go, I like the guy. I mean, I don't know him personally, but he seems like a good dude.
You and him with the Coles Cash brothers.
That's exactly right. Yes. But I also want to thank him for not saying that he was going to come back for the Vikings playoff run last football season. I think he was realistic as far as his timeline goes, unlike other notable quarterbacks that have Achilles injuries.
The speed bridge, though, bro. The speed bridge.
Yeah. So, with that being said, 10.5 months. This injury usually, sidelines folks for around 10 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Reasonable timeline. So, going into the season, I think Kirk Cousins is going to be who Kirk Cousins is. Like, you're not expecting him to move around the pocket a ton. You're not expecting him to, break out and run for 15, 20 yards. So I think as far as a passer goes, he'll be fine. As far as fantasy goes, I don't know if I would necessarily draft Kirk Cousins. Personally, I think he's one that, depends on how deep your league is, but in your standard 10, 12 team leagues, he's probably one of those that is going to end up on a waiver wire, is going to, he may go through the draft not being drafted anyway. So if he, especially being in this new situation with kind of unproven talent around him from the wide receiver perspective, I don't know if he's going to be like that top 5, top 10 fantasy quarterback. So I would probably hold off on him. But with that being said, he's definitely an upgrade from Heineke and Ritter.
Heineke,
so
man.
From a Falcons perspective, I think their offense will be better.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking Taylor Heineke is going to be a great name to pull in about like 20 years. He's going to be like, when you're just thinking of like a random players from like back in the day, like Rex Burkhead or somebody like that. You're just like, remember Taylor Heineke going up against Tom Brady in the playoffs and kind of, give him a little run before they won the Super. Like, that's going to be a great pull. That's 10, 20 years down the line. No, man, I think you're on it. The little bit of concerns with it being the power leg where he's got to generate. So, we'll definitely flush some of that out from training camp. But the
from that point, like, he is somebody that can push or is willing to push the ball down the field. And they will have some dudes that can run in terms of Rondale Moore and Darnell Mooney. So that may be missing from that offense. We'll see.
Yeah, especially early on is the only thing I would see it affect, those first 4 weeks. I think after that he'll be fine. But one, for those that didn't know, we were talking about my dog's going off there in the back. But for those that didn't know what he was referring to, he was talking about Aaron Rodgers there for the New York Jets, where everyone laughably thought, the other quarterback, the other guy who everyone laughably thought, what was it? Less than 6 months he was going to come back. Yeah, we were trying to tell. I think we were just yelling at the top of our lungs, like, "Hey guys, this is not. Please don't fall for this." Like, the worst thing I saw was DraftKings putting out like, "Will he return or will he make a pass?" And it was only yes. You couldn't bet no. Like, I always hate bets like that. I feel like there's such a scammy thing, like just taking people's money. There was no chance he was going to play. So hopefully you didn't fall into that trap and you listened up last year. Question for you: would you rather take Matt Stafford, Justin Herbert, or Kirk Cousins in your draft? Because those are similar ADPs we're talking about with Kirk Cousins.
Read those back to me. Herbert,
Stafford, or Cousins?
Herbert, Stafford, or Cousins. I would probably put Cousins as in the 3 hole there. I would probably go Stafford 1, Herbert 2, and then Cousins, mostly because Stafford has weapons all around him in terms of Puka and
Cooper Kupp. Yeah.
And then Herbert does have that running ability. I mean, he's a big, tough dude that can move in the pocket. So even with Harbaugh coming in there and wanting to pound the rock, I think he's going to have a decent year.
Yeah. No, I actually, yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think I'd go Stafford, Cousins, and then Herbert just because of that concern with Harbaugh really trying to run it 40 times a game. But no, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. Stafford is actually going after Cousins. Again, I pulled this, I think, from Fantasy Pros, just kind of average ADPs, right? So it might differ, obviously, in your draft a little bit, but just want to talk about some guys similar range there. The other guy we're going to talk about really quick is Grady Jarrett, defensive tackle there. I think their best defensive lineman by far in Atlanta.
Yeah, he's a stud.
He's dealing with an ACL tear. So as you can see, ACL, anterior cruciate ligament, one of your major stabilizing ligaments in the knee, similar to Achilles, season-ending surgery. These guys actually got injured on the same day, same Sunday. So they're both coming back with 10 and a half, months to recover, about 10 and a half, 12 months. I wouldn't be surprised if Grady Jarrett starts, maybe on a snap count or something like that for the first 4 games or so. I would not expect him to just have a great year as we're used to. So I would expect a little bit of a dip. What about you? Is this something that you're a little bit concerned about with Jarrett?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head as far as the snap count, especially again, big dude putting a lot of pressure, a lot of weight on those knees, on those ligaments. So that 10.5-month time frame, probably okay. But as we know, the research shows if we can get to a year, if we can get to 16 months, if we can get to 12 or 2 years, the likelihood of re-injury is a lot less. So I think he will start the season, but not at the same rate as we're used to seeing.
Yeah. And I mean, this, talking about ACLs, it does usually affect wide receivers, running backs, the skill guys a little bit more. But as Derek mentioned, research shows it could take up to 2 years for normal movement to return. So getting back to where you feel like your old self, right? Not only a physical, but a psychological thing. You got to relearn how to walk. You got to relearn how to trust. You're a big boy. You're trying to, you got offensive linemen trying to fire out at them. And so some of that,
it's ankles all the time. So
it's not super easy, right? So Grady Jarrett, and yeah, let's get back to big takeaways. I know you talked about it. I'm going to do a favor and pull up our the depth chart here for the Atlanta Falcons. Let's take a look at that defense. I mean, we talked about Grady Jarrett, obviously great player, but ACL coming back. How much can we get from him this year? Outside of AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates, I watch a lot of football. I barely know. I know Lorenzo Carter because he was a scrub for the Giants. So if you were not a starter for the New York Football Giants on the defense the last 5 years, yeah, you being a starter is definite concerns for me. So I know you talked about, you have a little bit more faith in this offense with Bijan, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. For me, I still need to see it. Other than Bijan, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, a lot of potential. I still need to see it. But that defense, holy shit. I can barely name anybody.
But like you said, outside of Terrell, Bates, being from Ohio, being a Buckeyes guy, Zach Harrison never, got to the hype that he was getting when he was in college. So if he's going to be their starter, I don't know what we're looking for.
I'm just saying, like, on paper, this might be the worst defense in the league. So I get, like, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson in fantasy, and they're flashy. I think you're, like you said, their offensive line isn't bad. They're a decent group. But maybe I can get excited for the offense, but that defense just absolutely takes away my excitement right away. So this leads me into, I'll start off with my best bet. You probably can tell where I'm going with this, but I will be taking the under 9.5 wins on the Atlanta Falcons this year. They were 7-10 last year. I don't think they're 3 wins better than where they were. You have a quarter. Obviously, Kirk Cousins is an upgrade at quarterback, coming off the Achilles, coming off the questions of why the hell did you guys just draft a rookie in the first round? You just paid me a shit ton of money. I don't like that situation. Darnell Mooney, Rondell Moore, they've always kind of been guys with a lot of potential, never really put up the numbers. So even if the offense is successful, I'm telling you, man, that defense scares the living hell out of me. So I like the under at plus 115 there. And then I also like them to miss the playoffs at plus 200. We just talked about only think one team's going to come out of this division. I think that, if they're not going to get above 9 wins or 9.5, excuse me, I think they're going to be somewhere close to where they were, maybe even 8 and 9 or something like that. I don't think that's going to be enough to get the playoffs or get the division win there. So give me their under 9.5 at plus 115 and to miss the playoff at plus 200. What do you got for the Falcons?
So I went back to the player props with the Falcons. So like you said, I am a little bit higher on the Falcons, at least their offense, than you are. With Kirk Cousins coming in there, we know he likes to throw to his number one target. Drake London's gonna be that guy. Last year he finished with just over 900 receiving yards. I think it was 69 receptions.
Nice. That's how you know the whiskey is flowing.
Exactly. I can see a path where he gets an extra, 15, 20 receptions, an extra 250 yards, 300 yards, and gets over his 1250 receiving yards on the year. And that's right now at plus 200 on DraftKings. So I'm going over 1250 for Drake London at plus 200.
I mean, it's a lot of yards, but plus 200 ain't bad.
He got to 900 with Desmond Ridder and Heineke.
Yeah.
So
you gotta. Even though I'm low on the Falcons, like we're gonna talk about another team where I think that there's a clear alpha wide receiver, and if they're smart, they're gonna feed the hell out of him. And he was open. I think that I drafted Drake London last year. I don't. I think he's a good wide receiver. He's got a lot of potential, but that quarterback situation was just god awful. And you're right. He almost put up 1,000 yards with that. So I definitely do not hate that play at all, even though I am kind of a Falcons hater for the season.